We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
A new virus that has killed 9 people, infected hundreds, and already reached the United States could mutate and spread, China warned Wednesday, as authorities scramble to contain the disease during the Lunar New Year travel season.
U.S. senators reject an amendment proposed by Chuck Schumer, leader of the Democratic minority, aiming to subpoena the White House for documents in President Donald Trump's impeachment trial.
And PHIVOLCS reported that since 5 a.m. this morning, there were no ash emissions based on seismic records and visual observations. But magma is still in the surface, and the agency reiterates that alert level 4 remains over Taal Volcano.
And riot police clash with demonstrators in the Colombian capital, Bogota, as anti-government protests resume across the country.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. A new virus that has killed 9 people, infected hundreds, and already reached the United States could still mutate and spread, according to China, as authorities scramble to contain the disease during the Lunar New Year travel season. Let's take a look.
疫情传播途径以呼吸道传播为主，病毒存在变异的可能，疫情存在着进一步扩大的风险。
The coronavirus has caused alarm for its similarity to SARS, or the severe acute respiratory syndrome, which killed nearly 650 people across mainland China and Hong Kong back in 2002 to 2003. In Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak, authorities canceled large public events and urged visitors to stay away, telling residents not to leave the central Chinese city of 11 million people. The virus has now infected at least 440 people across the country, with most cases in Wuhan. Plane passengers are facing screening measures at 5 U.S. airports and a host of transport hubs across Asia. A prominent expert from China's National Health Commission confirmed this week that the virus can be passed between people. At the capital's main international airport, the majority of people were wearing masks. Hong Kong flag carrier Cathay Airlines said they agreed to allow staff to wear surgical masks on mainland China flights, adding they would also offer masks and antiseptic wipes to passengers traveling from Wuhan to the city. In Wuhan, police were also conducting vehicle spot checks for live poultry or wild animals leaving and entering the city, according to state media. Officials also screened people on roads, the airport, and the train station for fevers.
More cases should be expected in other parts of China and possibly other countries in coming days. A team from WHO are concluding a mission with health officials in Wuhan working on the response to novel coronavirus. Based on current information, an animal source seems the most likely primary source of this outbreak, with limited human-to-human transmission occurring between close contacts. Based on previous experience with respiratory illnesses, and in particular with other coronavirus outbreaks, and our analysis of data shared by China, human-to-human transmission is occurring. Reports suggest that novel coronavirus infection can cause mild to severe disease and be fatal in some. Based on current data, some new cases seem to experience milder disease, which is within the milder end of the spectrum of symptoms caused by respiratory illnesses.
I think we're now looking at a much larger scale, probably as a nationwide kind of outbreak. The rapidly increasing number of cases reflected that the virus is now in a phase that it could be easily transmitted from man to man. The other thing is that it might be that some of the new cases have not been reported as promptly as it should be. If you look at the phylogenetic tree, it is it's like a cousin of the SARS coronavirus. It's about 80% similarity in the sequencing. So we're expecting the virus probably to behave very similar to the previous SARS coronaviruses. Unfortunately, the outbreak is currently coincide with the traveling during the Chinese New Year, which if you are in a confined environment within a plane or a train, then it's important that you should be wearing a surgical mask to prevent the transmission of these virus to you or to your family.
We know that it can transmit from people, from humans to humans, but we don't know fully the full extent of that, so that's some of the information we're trying to figure out. We know that this virus usually comes from an animal source, yet we haven't been able to identify what the animal is at the moment. I think that's one of the priorities as well. The fact that it's a respiratory infection means that we always are worried of these. They're far more easier to spread compared to other viruses such as Ebola, which is more through touching bodily fluids. So with respiratory infections, we already see a lot of those in the world. This is winter at the moment in the northern hemisphere, so we are currently dealing with colds, we're dealing with influenza. So having a new virus like this novel coronavirus adds to that concern. We saw over the weekend a drastic increase in cases of this in Wuhan, China. So I think we can imagine that these cases are going to continue to increase. We've already seen some of the cases occur with people traveling from Wuhan into other countries, such as Japan and such as Thailand. So I think we're going to continue to see increase of cases in other countries. So during SARS, there were criticisms around China not providing enough information, not being transparent. But we have to also remember that is nearly 20 years ago. The world has changed in our governance. The way we organize ourselves when it comes to responding to these types of outbreaks has drastically changed. We have a really strengthened World Health Organization that is working with China at the moment to be able to share this information as soon as possible. There is going to be a lot of movement of people over the next few days and weeks, and we need to then put countries on preparedness. The WHO have released guidance for countries within the region and around the world on how they can prepare themselves, including how they detect this virus for those returning travelers, how they can treat them in the hospital and look after them. So I think those countries need to be prepared and look at those guidance materials.
Every flu season, and we are in the flu season, it's the exact same advice. Hand hygiene. Wash your hands often. Don't rub your nose and mouth. Please take care. If you are ill, put on a mask. If you go into a crowded place, put on a mask, even if you are not ill, because others may be, even if they have cough etiquette or sneeze etiquette, they may still get in touch with you. Try to avoid crowded places. Make sure that you are considerate of others. If you have any symptoms, especially if you have got travel history to Wuhan, then please go and seek medical attention and be honest and open with your doctors.
A thermal scanner is set up at Ninoy Aquino International Airport.
I'm afraid to get infected with that virus because my body is not really that strong enough to fight an infection. I have a lot of health problems.
Meanwhile, the Department of Health is also investigating the case of a 5-year-old boy who arrived from Wuhan City, China, and tested positive for a still unidentified strain of coronavirus amid an outbreak of a mysterious illness in the world's most populous country. Terchito Avellino, officer in charge of DOH's Epidemiology Bureau, said the child arrived in Cebu City with his mother on January 12. The boy and his mother are currently isolated in a Cebu City hospital.
Meanwhile, Malaysia has also installed thermal scanners at its Kuala Lumpur airport in a bid to stop the spread of the new SARS-like coronavirus, which first emerged in China's Wuhan as the reach of the deadly disease continues to grow throughout Asia. Here's Lee Boon Chie, Malaysia's Deputy Health Minister. Take a look.
As you can see that over the past few months, we have screened more than 250 passengers, including crews. So that's a large number. And we pick up 61 of them who had fever, and none of them had from Wuhan, and none of them had this coronavirus. To look at preparedness of our system with regards to screening for this potential epidemic of new 2019 NCOV, new coronavirus originated from Wuhan. So we are looking at our thermal scan, looking at how our staff are trained to quarantine the patient and also to treat the patient, and they are also have appropriate protecting equipment.
Thailand's health ministry holds a press briefing amid an outbreak of a SARS-like virus originating in China. The kingdom's airports will receive hundreds of thousands of Chinese tourists over the Lunar New Year holiday. Here's more.
Want to make sure that if any tourists appear to be sick before traveling, they should prolong their trip and not trying to insist on coming while they are sick. Then this is the way that they can help controlling the spread of the outbreak. Please do come to Thailand during this Chinese New Year or any time. We will be able to contain the spread of this disease. We will be able to give the proper treatment in case the disease popped up.
Really, our biggest concern at this point is that we're still learning a lot about this virus. We still don't know exactly where it came from. We don't understand fully how it's transmitted. We don't understand completely how it presents and the different symptoms in all cases. We've all recognized that the rapid sharing of information is absolutely critical because we all need to understand this new virus and how it acts so that we can respond appropriately. The public needs to know that if they develop symptoms, respiratory symptoms, fever, cough, before they travel, they should see their doctor and they shouldn't travel. If they develop symptoms while they're traveling or when they arrive at their destination, they should see a physician or a healthcare provider and get checked out. There are some differences, some important differences. What we call the case fatality rate or the lethality of the SARS coronavirus was much greater. And again, we haven't learned everything about this new coronavirus, but we do notice that it was that the SARS virus was much more severe.
Jay Inslee, the governor of the state of Washington, calls for a moment for vigilance as the United States announced its first case of the new virus that has claimed 9 lives in China and sickened hundreds. The man, a U.S. resident in his 30s who lives near Seattle, is in good condition according to federal and state officials. Take a look.
The good news is the CDC, and we also agree that the risk is low to residents of the state of Washington. And this is certainly not a moment for panic or high anxiety. It is a moment for vigilance. We have a very comprehensive approach that is acting very quickly to respond to this, to identify the potential folks who may be subject to transmission, and also obviously care for the individual who's involved. We're pleased that the CDC has adopted a policy of essentially having only 5 airports in the United States who will receive visitors on direct flights from China or in linked flights from China. And those folks will be subject to a screening protocol that the CDC will be responsible for. We should all do exactly what we always do, which is this is flu season, so we wash our hands, we cover our mouths when we sneeze, and when we are ill, we stay home from work so we don't expose other people to infection.
PVOS reported that since 5 a.m. this morning, there were no ash emissions based on our seismic records and visual observations. However, unconsolidated ash blanketing Taal Volcano Island has been remobilized and transported by strong low-level winds towards southwest, affecting the towns of Lemery and Agoncillo. Reports from several airlines state the presence of a remobilized volcanic ash at a height of approximately 5,800 meters, or that's 19,000 feet. PVOS reiterates alert level 4 over Taal Volcano. This means that hazardous explosive eruption is still possible within hours to days.
Ang sulfur dioxide emission ay nasukat sa mababang average na 153 tons per day. 2 araw na po tayong nakasukat ng mababang SO2. Hindi porke bumabang SO2 ay safe na tayo dahil pwedeng nababarahan lamang ang mga labasan ng SO2. Pwedeng nagbigas na yung ibabaw ng magma at hindi na makalabas yung SO2. So maraming pwedeng maging factors. Kailangan natin makita yung dire-diretsong trend na pababa.
PVOS said it is hard for them to assess if Taal Volcano is safe because of the magma that has already reached near the surface.
Problema ng ating assessment natin sa magma ngayon kasi ibig sabihin nakadaan na, sumampa na eh. So ano na yung gagawin nung nakasampa ng magma? Is the next question, yung susunod na katanungan. And this is a dilemma actually, no? Kung paano natin i-interpret yung nakapondo na ng magma, no, na dumaan at nagbasag-basag ng nagbitak-bitak ng lupa dito sa ating sa Timog Kanluran at nagsanhi ng pag-alsa ng Taal region.
DOST PVOS strongly recommends total evacuation of Taal Volcano Island and high-risk areas as identified in the hazard maps within the 14-kilometer ranges from Taal main crater and along the Pansipit River Valley where fishing has been observed.
Meanwhile, houses near the rumbling Taal Volcano were abandoned as police imposed a no-entry rule, forcing many villagers to stay in emergency shelters and uncertain as to when they could return home. Images of villagers and aerial images of the island are shown here. Meanwhile, let's take a look.
Ay na po, napakasobra pong hirap na walang kasiguraduhan dahil inisip kung saan ay dahil una-una po may matanda po kaming senior, may mga bata. Saan po kami lilikas, saan po kami pupunta na walang kasiguraduhan ang aming pupuntahan.
Kung ako nga, gusto ko ayaw yung mga asawa ko. Walang iwanan ko mga aray, lalo pat naglililindol. Walang mag-intindi. Cesarean pang asawa ko, mahirap, hindi makakailis na kayo. May matanda pa kami kasama.
The historic impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump opens debate in the Senate as Democrats accuse the Republicans of attempting a cover-up of evidence that the U.S. leader abused his powers. The first full day of the historic trial saw the Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell submit a resolution on procedures that does not admit evidence from the investigation of the president. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blasted Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's RKY proposed Senate impeachment trial rules on Tuesday morning and Monday. McConnell changed the rules later on Tuesday so that each side has 24 hours to present its position within 3 days. Let's listen in.
21 years ago, 100 senators agreed unanimously that this roadmap was the right way to begin the trial. All 100 senators agreed the proper time to consider the question of potential witnesses was after opening arguments and senators' questions. Now, some outside voices have been urging the Senate to break with precedent on this question. Loud voices, including the leadership of the House majority, colluded with Senate Democrats and tried to force the Senate to pre-commit ourselves to seek specific witnesses and documents before senators had even heard opening arguments or even asked questions. These are potential witnesses, Mr. President, whom the House managers themselves declined to hear from, whom the House itself declined to pursue through the legal system during its own inquiry. The House was not facing any deadline. They were free to run whatever investigation they wanted to run. If they wanted witnesses who would trigger legal battles over presidential privilege, they could have had those fights. But the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee decided not to. They decided their inquiry was finished and moved right ahead. The House chose not to pursue the same witnesses they apparently would now like the Senate to pre-commit to pursuing ourselves. As I've been saying for weeks, nobody will dictate Senate procedure to United States senators. A majority of us are committed to upholding the unanimous, bipartisan Clinton precedent against outside influences with respect to the proper timing of these mid-trial questions.
The Senate will proceed to the impeachment trial of President Donald John Trump for committing high crimes and misdemeanors. President Trump is accused of coercing a foreign leader into interfering in our elections to benefit himself and then doing everything in his power to cover it up. If proved, the president's actions are crimes against democracy itself. The Republican leader will offer an organizing resolution that outlines his plan for the rules of the trial. It is completely partisan. It was kept secret until the very eve of the trial. And now that it's public, it's very easy to see why. The McConnell rules seem to be designed by President Trump for President Trump. It asks the Senate to rush through as fast as possible and makes getting evidence as hard as possible. It could force presentations to take place at 2 or 3 in the morning so the American people won't see them. In short, the McConnell resolution will result in a rush trial with little evidence in the dark of night. The evidence is supposed to inform arguments, not come after they're completed. Some Republicans have said the Senate should not go beyond the House record by calling any witnesses. But the Constitution gives the Senate the sole power to try impeachments, not the sole power to review, not the sole power to rehash, but to try. Republicans have called our request for witnesses and documents political. If seeking the truth is political, then the Republican Party is in serious trouble.
Meanwhile, White House counsel Pat Cipollone, the first member of President Trump's defense team, speaks on the Senate floor as the impeachment trial gets underway. Cipollone lends his support to Senator Mitch McConnell's changing of the resolution which gives the House impeachment managers and the president's team 3 days each to make their 24 hours of trial arguments instead of 2 as McConnell had initially proposed. Let's listen in.
We believe that once you hear those initial presentations, the only conclusion will be that the President has done absolutely nothing wrong, and that these articles of impeachment do not begin to approach the standard required by the Constitution, and in fact, they themselves will establish nothing beyond those articles.
How can any decision you will make be more important than guilt or innocence, than removing the President or not removing the President? I believe the most important decision in this case is the one you will make today. The most important question is the question you must answer today. Will the President and the American people get a fair trial?
Meanwhile, the U.S. Senate repeatedly voted on party lines to block Democrat efforts to subpoena government documents and records. As the second day of U.S. President Donald Trump's impeachment trial continued in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, President Trump's lawyer Jay Sekulow fought back against attempts to force the release of records of the president's conversation, stating that presidential conversations are presumptively privileged. House Impeachment Manager and House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff asserted that if the Senate didn't allow Trump to be subpoenaed, it was setting a dangerous precedent for the future. White House counsel Jay Sekulow on Tuesday also said executive privilege issues should have been hashed out in the courts before the start of the impeachment trial in the Senate. Again, let's listen in.
The oath requires you to do impartial justice, which means to see the evidence. To see the evidence. That's all we're asking. Just don't blind yourself to the evidence.
A fair process would be when you come to the day of trial, be ready to start the trial and present your case, not ask for more discovery. The President is ready to proceed, and the House manager should be ready to proceed, and this amendment should be rejected. It's remarkable that after taking the action of the breathtaking gravity of voting to impeach the duly elected President of the United States, and after saying for weeks that they had overwhelming evidence to support their case, the first thing that the House managers have done upon arriving finally in this chamber after waiting for 33 days is to say, well, actually, we need more evidence.
The Senate does not just vote on impeachments. It does not just debate them. Instead, it is commanded by the Constitution to try all cases of impeachment.
We keep executive privilege, and we assert it when necessary. And that is to protect the Constitution and the separation of powers. The President's opponents, in their rush to impeach, have refused to wait for complete judicial review. That was their choice. Speaker Pelosi clearly expressed her impatience and contempt for judicial proceedings when she said, "We cannot be at the mercy of the courts." Think about that for a moment. We cannot be at the mercy of the courts. So take Article 3 of the United States Constitution, remove it. We're acting as if the courts are an improper venue to determine constitutional issues of this magnitude. That is why we have courts. That is why we have a federal judiciary. It was interesting when Professor Turley testified before the House Judiciary Committee in front of Mr. Nadler's committee. He said, we have 3 branches of government, not 2. If you impeach a president, if you make a high crime and misdemeanor out of going to courts and abuse of power, it's your abuse of power. You know, it's more than that. A lot more than that. There's a lot more than an abuse of power if you say the courts don't apply. Constitutional principles don't apply. Let's start with a clean slate as if nothing happened. A lot has happened. As we proceed in the days ahead, we will lay out our case. We're going to put forward to the American people, but more important, for the Constitution's sake, what's taken place here. But this idea that we should ignore what has taken place over the last 3 years is outrageous. We believe that what Senator McConnell has put forward provides due process, allows the proceedings to move forward in an orderly fashion. 33 days. 33 days they held on to those impeachment articles. 33 days.
We'll be back with more news right after this break. Stay tuned.
Tungkulin ng MTRCB ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all. Oops, rated PG. Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Sabi, rated SPG, maselan!
Ipitan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCB, rated responsable.
Lebanon's newly unveiled cabinet met Wednesday for the first time to start tackling the twin challenges posed by a tenacious protest movement and a nose-diving economy. Hassan Diab, who replaced Saad Hariri as prime minister, vowed to meet the demands from the street, but demonstrators were unconvinced and scuffled with police overnight.
هي حكومة تعبر عن تطلعات المعتصمين على مساحة الوطن خلال أكثر من 3 أشهر من الغضب، وستعمل لترجمة مطالبهم باستقلالية القضاء واستعادة الأموال المنهوبة ومكافحة الإثراء غير المشروع.
The 61-year-old academic was thrown in at the deep end for his first experience on the political big stage and admitted that Lebanon was experiencing a difficult time in its history. Protesters from across Lebanon's geographical and confessional divides had demanded a cabinet of independent technocrats as a first step to root out endemic government corruption and incompetence. Clusters of demonstrators burned tires and briefly blocked roads to express their displeasure at the new lineup, but clashes with riot police were on a smaller scale than weekend violence that left dozens wounded. Similar rallies took place in Tripoli, a hotbed of the protest movement, in Sidon, Byblos, and other cities. The new cabinet is mostly made up of new faces, many of them academics and former ministry advisors.
Meanwhile, riot police clashed with demonstrators in the Colombian capital, Bogota, as anti-government protests resume across the country. Take a look.
Greece's parliament on Wednesday elected the first woman president in the country's history, a senior judge with an expertise in environmental and constitutional law. A cross-party majority of 261 of the 294 MPs voted in favor of 63-year-old Ekaterini Sakeliaropoulos. Parliament Chief Kostas Tassoula said, the daughter of Supreme Court Judge Sakeliaropoulos completed postgraduate studies at Paris Sorbonne University. She was also the first woman to head the Council of State, although the president is nominally the head of the Greek state and commander-in-chief. The post is largely ceremonial. Greek presidents confirm governments and laws and technically have the power to declare war, but only in conjunction with the government.
Meanwhile, in the midst of the rubble of his ruined house, Mohammed searches in the hope of finding some belongings. His two sisters lost their lives in the bombing. At least 7 civilians were killed after airstrikes of the Syrian regime and its Russian ally hit several localities in northern Syria, according to the Syrian Human Rights Observatory. Again, let's take a look.
يعني باركين بيت وهون النسوان باركين 13 14 نفس هون. الضربة عند النسوان صارت أطفال صغار وكلها تحت الدير صارت 3 اللي ماتوا وطالعنا كمان طيبين ومنهم مكسرين ومنهم جلجطين وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل.
جيت على البيت ولا مات البيت فوق العيلتين 7 إصابات 3 شهداء أساس بيدني يلا خلي.
Hundreds of people crowd hospitals of Asuncion amid a dengue epidemic that has killed 2 people, with 12 more deaths suspected to be caused by the return of the virus. Here's more.
El dengue es terrible, se le llama rompehueso, ¿verdad? Porque el dolor es tremendo, el dolor que produce a cualquier nivel de cabeza y cosa es tremendo, y por supuesto todos están desesperados, ¿verdad? Los adultos, y si son hijos y los padres, peor, ¿verdad? O sea, peor, nos desesperamos por los hijos, ¿verdad?
As of January 17, 94 cases of dengue fever have been reported across 7 regions of Paraguay, resulting in 2 confirmed deaths. According to the broadcaster, the majority of cases have been concentrated in regions around Asuncion. The health ministry has warned that the number of cases is expected to increase dramatically during the first week of February. Dengue fever is a mosquito-borne viral disease that can entail serious, potentially lethal health conditions. Symptoms may include headaches, vomiting, skin rash, and low blood pressure, while children and elderly people are considered the most vulnerable to this infection. Up to half of all lethal cases occur among adults aged 20 to 40.
In other news, the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation sponsored a health summit encouraging people to take care of their health this new year. Macy Membrere reports.
To start off the new year, the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation held a health summit in Sacramento, California, to educate and inform members of the community on how to better take care of themselves.
So FYM, the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, is an outreach program to the communities all around the United States and all around the world, where we give back to the community. We offer health services.
Today, we're here in Sacramento. We're having a health summit. And in the past, we've done community outreach that we do blood pressure checks, blood sugar checks, and BMI checks. But this time, for our health summit, we're doing the education part. So we talk about obesity, high blood pressure, and diabetes. We do have physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses optometrists and dentists in the FYM Foundation that can share their expertise on several topics.
The volunteers express what they hope attendees gain from this event.
So hopefully, for those that attend today, as you mentioned, it's the new year. So hopefully they can use the information that they learned.
Hopefully they learn something and then they can bring it into their life, start living a healthier life, and they could share it with others who are planning on starting that for themselves.
Attendee Robert Gillis shares his thoughts on the Health Summit.
Actually, it was more informative than when we're at our doctors because they want a quick fix way of taking care of us, just a few moments. But in this seminar we went in more details and we had a better understanding of how and what we need to do to take care of ourselves and to be aware of signs that will show if we're in poor health or not.
The attendees left with a positive mindset, enlightened and motivated to be healthy in this new year. In Sacramento, California, Macy Membury, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
We'll be back with more news right after this break.
Watch your favorite Net25 shows on OSN Channel 725, same day as the Philippines.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Almost 500 million people are working fewer paid hours than they would like or lack adequate access to paid work, according to a new International Labor Organization report. In addition, the World Employment and Social Outlook Trends 2020 shows that unemployment is projected to increase by around 2.5 million in 2020. Global unemployment has been roughly stable for the last 9 years, but slowing global economic growth means that as the global labor force increases, not enough new jobs are being generated to absorb new entrants to the labor market. Here's Guy Ryder, ILO's Director General, talking to reporters in Geneva.
Young people face particular labor market challenges, and there is an extraordinary figure in this report, and it is that 22% of young people, 267 million of them, are in the NEET category, not in employment, not in education and training. And this is, I think, one of the greatest social drama of our time. Gender, obviously, is a major dimension and vector of inequality. In 2019, the female labour force participation was just 47%, and that is 27 percentage points below the male rate.
What I think is new and I think very important about this report is that it goes beyond that headline figure of global unemployment, which remains at 5.4%, 188 million. It extends on that to look at the extent of what we term labour underutilisation. So these are people who are not officially unemployed, they're not part of that 188 million, but people who maybe are not working as many hours as they would like to work. This is time underutilisation. Or people who are sort of tenuously connected to the labour market, people who are available for work but perhaps they've given up trying, or people who are really beginning to look for work even if they're not today available for it. So this is the potential workforce. And here's the point. If you add all of those categories together, you get from that 5.4% of open unemployment to 13% of the global workforce, who in one way or another are underutilized, have a major problem of creation of decent work opportunities. And that problem is probably bigger than we tend to realize from focusing exclusively on unemployment figures. But the report goes beyond that to look, for example, at levels of inequality in labor markets. And one familiar story which is documented is the continuing decline of the labor share of national income, that percentage of GDP that goes to workers as opposed to capital. That's still going down. But within that labor sector, within that labor share, we're seeing a very, very skewed and unequal distribution of income.
To Davos now. At the World Economic Forum, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin warned that Washington would slap a painful tariff on EU auto imports if Europeans go through with a digital tax that mainly targets U.S. firms. Take a look.
I think we've been pretty clear that we think that the digital tax is discriminatory in nature. There's an OECD process that we're participating in. International tax issues are very complicated. They take long times to look at. And, you know, if people want to just arbitrarily put taxes on our digital companies, we'll consider arbitrarily putting taxes on car companies.
Meanwhile, in an update, Presidents Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump have agreed to extend till the end of the year negotiations on the dispute over the French tax targeting online giants, postponing Washington's threat of sanctions, according to French officials. A French diplomatic source said the French and U.S. leaders who spoke by telephone on Sunday agreed to give negotiations a chance to find a solution in an international framework and avoid a trade war that will benefit no one. France announced in July that it would impose a 3% levy on revenue from digital services earned in France by firms with revenues of more than 25 million euros in France and 750 million euros worldwide. Washington has accused Paris of singling out U.S. companies such as Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Netflix. In response, the U.S. threatened to apply taxes up to 100% up or 100% of the value of imported French products such as camembert cheese, wine, and champagne.
North Korea will ban foreign tourists to protect itself against a new SARS-like virus that has claimed at least 9 lives in China and sickened hundreds, a major tour operator said. Watch this.
Fifteen-year-old prodigy Coco Gauff set up an Australian Open blockbuster with defending champion Naomi Osaka on Wednesday as Serena Williams screamed and shouted her way into the third round. Take a look. On a day when men's seeds stumbled, Serbia's Novak Djokovic strode towards his 8th Melbourne title, and soon to retire Caroline Wozniacki lived to fight another day. American teenager Gauff, showing a tenacity which is becoming her trademark, clawed her way back from a set down to beat the experienced Sorana Cîrstea 4-6, 6-3, 7-5. Gauff, who bellowed and pumped her fist as she completed her victory, said, Her will to win had got her through the tough second-round match at a windswept Melbourne Park. Goff also beat Williams on her Grand Slam debut last year at Wimbledon, and in another quirk, she faced Osaka in the U.S. Open third round, going down meekly in straight sets. Meanwhile, Serena Williams shouted at the top of her voice during a testing second set against her 70th ranked Tamara Zidansek before seeing off break points to win 6-2, 6-3.
Residents in what is considered an undeserved community in Corpus Christi called Molina neighborhood say a recent church mission there is a blessing to them. Eagle News correspondent Dejana Stanislao reports.
Hello from Corpus Christi, Texas. We're here at the Molina Neighborhood Center, where volunteers from the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ are sharing their faith by giving back to the community.
My name is Eric Lee Tunches. I'm from the city of Corpus Christi, state of Texas, and I've been living here in the Molina neighborhood for the last 32 years of my life. And I'm very heavily involved in the neighborhood, in the community outreach programs. Well, my friend Kat, she called me and she wanted to see if we can put together a venue for a very needy neighborhood. The first place that I thought of was the Molina Neighborhood Center. This is where I grew up. This is where I recreated as a child, and I grew up down the street.
My family's from the Molina area. My grandma raised all 13 of her kids here in this area. Really, she did. The past, but this place was a bad spot. When I was growing up, this was a bad area.
The Molina neighborhood is a low socioeconomic neighborhood. We're located in the city's west side, most nationally known for the city of Salina and also the neighborhood of Salina. Selena's been dead for 25 years, and she was the queen of Tejano. So we have some big roots into Tejano music and Mexican-American music for the world. Molina neighborhood has been underserved for decades. We have been neglected from city council to the state to federal levels as well. That's the reason why I thought that the Molina neighborhood would be a great choice for the Church of Christ Village Evangelical to come on in and help our brothers and sisters down here in Corpus Christi, Texas.
With regards to the Village Evangelical Mission, this is actually in line with what our Lord Jesus Christ did himself. He went from city to city and from village to village to preach the words of our Almighty God. We were able to get together and distribute invitations to over 500 houses within the Molina community. Our brethren, many of them didn't have much sleep the night before because they were packing all of the food and continue to make the preparations. Whatever sacrifice it took, they were willing to make it.
Today, I found out about today's event due to a text message. Really, I was at the emergency at the doctor's regional, and a gentleman that has been looking for us for actually a whole year now, he said, "Hey, I have this invitation, you all should go." And we said, "Alrighty, sir, we'll go."
I found this on Facebook on my wall, and I said, I'm going to go check it out, see what it's all about. That was great that provided today the groceries back to people. They need that, especially in this part of the city.
How did you find out about this event?
To get a card, yeah. I saw it on Facebook, and then I got this card at my door yesterday. There's a lot of people, a lot of children that are hungry. They don't have any food at home. Very grateful. Very grateful and very grateful. Yes. You feel blessed. Thank you.
They gave us groceries, water, clothing, good word, worship, anything you need. Direction, answers, prayers. I see that in this building. I honestly think that, if we get enough people to change their hearts and their minds about the poverty and how they see people, that we can make something great happen here. I like this church.
Very blessing for all of us. For
Especially this Molina edition.
Molina district also.
There's a lot of,
low-income people, but they're real friendly and kind. I think it was a beautiful service. There was a lot of people, happy people, and, you know, everybody was friendly. Have a blessed day.
We don't just provide, like, you know, the groceries and the clothing and all that. We also provide the food for your soul and for what you need from Him. So, for me, this is a blessing for me. This is a blessing for me.
I was very surprised, very well organized, very well communicated through some of the outlets of the news stations here locally and some of the social media groups. There was a very large volunteer system and a large group of people really wanting to help and being passionate about it. I'm very happy that this event is being successful. As you can see, there's a lot of people inside here getting their blood pressure checked, getting groceries that are needed for their homes and very vital.
Everybody's so joyful and they're like very friendly and very welcoming.
Yeah, before, like I said, before we even got to be in the parking lot, they were already letting us know.
Down. Hey, y'all come on in, let's go.
It was a very good experience, more better than what I had seen in any other churches. I actually felt el Espíritu de Dios aquí en este edificio.
But I received a good message today, and this is where I was supposed to be. God sent me in the right direction today. We still have people here willing to help. And now that I know about everybody on the other side of the world helping each other, I feel a little lighter inside. And so God placed us here today for a reason.
Reporting from Corpus Christi, Texas, this is Tatiana Estanislao, Eagle News 125.
And finally, in our news, a man breaks his own record for sitting in a barrel at the top of a pole. Vernon Kruger has been in a barrel at the top of a pole for more than 2 months. He broke his own record that he set back in 1997. Take a look.
I'm Vernon Kruger, and welcome to my home in the sky.
Sleeping in this barrel is not very easy. I've had a lot of cramps and pain in my back since I've been up here. It's a very small place to curl up in, and I have to lie in a fetal position. I do wash. I have a little basin that I fit in here, and then I wash, say twice a week. I'll have a bath.
And my two-way radio. Just some things I keep here. My cell phones. And a little night light. There is a drain, the hole, where all the washing water and all the waste goes down there. And there's a little basin that fits on here when I need it.
Vernon is not coming down when he breaks his record, which is Monday. He is not coming down. He's going to stay a little longer. We haven't been given a date, which we're concerned about because we've got to get him down.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here, I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.